Good afternoon. I would like to call the Assembly Committee on Revenue to order. I would ask that our secretary take the roll call.
Assembly members Considine, De Silva, Flanagan, Gallant, Goulding, Gray, Hafen, Nguyen, O'Neill, Roth, Chair Backus.
And I am present. Please mark Assembly Member O'Neill absent excused, and please mark Assembly Member Hafen present when he arrives. It's been a few weeks since we've been in revenue, so I just kind of would like to remind the audience. Well, our rules are pretty lax on testimony. Tonight we have two bills, and I would ask that hopefully we get out of here hopefully by 5:30 this evening, which would allow us an hour and a half to cover both bills. If I find that people are being repetitive, I would just ask that you say ditto so we can move it along. It does look like we have a lot of people who have joined us this evening, but hopefully I want to make sure we fully vet those bills, and so I would encourage those that are going to repeat testimony. Ditto is appropriate as well. With that, on our agenda this evening, we have Senate Bill 69. We also have Senate Bill 196. We are going to take those bills in order, and so I would go ahead and open the hearing on Senate Bill 69 and welcome Mr. Adler, Commissioner, and others from Story County.
Thank you all for having us. I'm Will Adler with Silver State Government Relations, representing Story County for the record. And we're letting County Manager Osborne get the quick presentation ready for you all today. I'll allow everyone else to do their own introductions.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Austin Osborne, A-U-S-T-I-N, O-S-B-O-R-N-E. I'm the Story County Manager. I'll be presenting here with our team here. Next to me is Jeremy Lonkar, our Story County Fire Protection District Chief, and also Clay Mitchell, our Story County Commissioner, and also Will Adler with Story County Silver State Government Relations. So what we're here to talk about today is Senate Bill 69. Senate Bill 69 is a bill about helping Nevada. It's about helping all of Nevada and all of Nevada's jurisdictions. And it's really just helping cities and counties and fire districts respond to huge gigafactories that are assigned to them by the state of Nevada under current regulations under NRS. It's a simple bill. We kept it simple, and with amendments, it's gotten simpler, and that's okay. And what it does is it just strategically adjusts NRS 271B and NRS 360 with regard to two large abatement categories, the $1 billion abatement category and the $3.5 billion category. If you remember in Senate Bill 1 in 2014, that was the quote-unquote Tesla Faraday package. At this point, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Commissioner Mitchell. Thank you.
Chair and Commission and Committee, thank you so much. Clay Mitchell, Story County Commissioner. So as you can see from this chart, we are Nevada's leader in tax abatements. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Since the Governor's Office of Economic Development was created in 2011, they've given out roughly 300 abatements, and about 40 of those have landed in our small county, abating over $1.8 billion worth of taxes. That's almost $1.5 billion more than any other county in the state. I also want to note that somewhere between 80 and 90% of those abated dollars come from local taxes, with the remainder coming from state taxes. So with Tri-Center and Nevada's 3 abated gigafactories, we're intimately familiar with economic development, with construction, with streamlined regulatory process, speed to vertical, and navigating the abatement landscape. Now, many members of GOED weren't there in 2014 when SB 1 was ratified, but Story County was, and specifically the gentleman over to my right, Austin Osborne, was part of that implementation. With the help of GOED and others, we navigated and facilitated the success of these 3 gigafactories. Now, Story County supports economic development in Nevada's business incentive programs. In fact, SB1 abatement programs have been an instrumental investment for us. They're enabling us to begin to address tens of millions of dollars in debt and critical infrastructure rehab across our county, and they're returning millions of dollars in revenue to the state. Because of this, SB 69 proposes only to slightly modify the $1 billion and $3.5 billion incentive categories. Now, in respect for your time, we included a slide that talks about the NRS 271B and 360. We're happy to answer questions about it, but we're going to move past that. And I'm going to turn it back over to County Manager Osborne to discuss some of the challenges that we have faced through this process.
All right, thank you. Austin Osborne for the record. Story County has lived with gigafactories for over a decade. They change your life. They change the culture of your county. They change everything. A lot of it's positive. It's not all negative. And we created Senate Bill 69 for everybody in Nevada because of our experiences that we've had, both good and bad. Here's why. It's not about GOED, it's not about people, it's not about this or that. It's really about systems, about the Nevada revised statutes and how they apply to these abated categories. It's about local jurisdictions, both rural and urban. Las Vegas as a city, Clark County, Washoe County, Esmeralda, all of us. And it's about our capacity to provide reliable services and provide sustainable services over that 10-year period of those abatements that occur for these large gigafactory projects. The good news is most of the jurisdictions are already poised to serve a lot of these abated companies. So, and thus, we made 69, including working with folks throughout the development of the process, and to this point, we amended it to be a little bit more amenable to the needs and actually some of the capacities that those larger jurisdictions like Clark or Washoe might have. So to give an example, if a company were to come to the Governor's Office of Economic Development and apply and say they're coming into Clark County, and Clark County gets the notice, congratulations, you got a company. Great, Clark County can respond, we don't need a government services agreement, we don't need to negotiate with a company, we got this. We got special use permit capacity, we could do a development agreement, there's other mechanisms, they're done. And then GOED goes ahead and processes that application, Clark County runs it through their local ordinances, life's good. Esmeralda County or a small one may say, we got this, but we need a little bit of help. We would like to negotiate a government services agreement. Our letter response is going to opt in. And then while we negotiate that government services agreement to offset those costs to us for that 10-year period, GOED at the same time will go ahead and negotiate that contract with the company and work through its application process. So to give an example of what that would look like, Humboldt or Esmeralda County, I'm not picking on them particularly, but they have large lithium deposits, I believe largest in the world. It's plausible that a large gigafactory might want to co-locate next to that. Those two counties don't know if they quite have the capacity to bring on a use that's going to take $26 million of 10 years of responding to fire, police, a couple roads, and some basic services to that company during that 10-year abated period. They would want to probably negotiate and try to come up with that offset agreement during that period of time. That's what Story County did, and it was $26 million that it took to us to respond to the Tesla Gigafactory during 10 years. Fortunately, Tesla, in good faith and working with us, negotiated an agreement, became great partners with the county, and to this day still are, and we were able to offset those costs. So funding these local impacts, fortunately, as I stated in the last slides, the NRS currently allows this negotiation to happen. It just doesn't necessarily mandate it. But in that allowance, we were able to provide firefighters, paramedics, a special fire truck, road rehabilitation, and providing police and other services to the Tesla Gigafactory during that 10-year beta period. So however, we can't require it at this time, and probably more important than anything with the fire chief here to my left, is currently cities and counties are involved, but the fire districts are not mentioned at all. And so they potentially could be completely left behind, and potentially they're the most impacted with having to provide services to these uses. And that would expose the county, the jurisdiction, and the fire district tens of millions of dollars in potential liabilities. Senate Bill 69 simply amends the existing structure. It brings local stakeholders to the table while GoEd works through its processes. The local governments can engage with GoEd as they do, negotiate that agreement, or like I said before, opt out, no big deal. And then again, working concurrently with GoEd on that process. And work also under non-disclosure agreement and other confidentiality. In other words, it requires what happens already successfully twice in Story County, bringing in 2 gigafactories to our county, really under the model we're bringing here in front of you today. Here's a digest. We're happy to go over any questions you have about the digest anytime you want. And at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Fire Protection District Chief Lonkar. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. Jeremy Lonkar for the record. And while I had a very nice little speech here typed up, just for brevity, I'm not going to recapture some of what County Manager Osborne and Commissioner Mitchell have stated. And I just want to hit on some of the core principles for the Fire Protection District. Keep in mind, we are the only fire protection district in the state of Nevada that has dealt with this. Yet, we were not awarded the same rights that a city or a county fire department receive. So under current NRS 360, they can negotiate with these companies to help get more staffing, maybe an ambulance, maybe a specialized ladder truck or an engine. They were able to work with those. However, just because the language within the existing bill, fire districts were excluded, we have no right to actually get in there and try to get the equipment or personnel we need to serve our community. And keep in mind that if we can't serve the community, we can't serve the business, we can't serve their suppliers, everything that goes with that. So everyone fails in that model. So when we were presented with this, it was give us a seat at the table to make sure that everyone is protected. We got to keep in mind that the growth of our economy, not just for Story County and the state of Nevada, must be hand in hand with public safety. That's what brings the businesses here. That's what makes them go, I want to be part of that. I want to do this $3.5 billion investment in this community where my employees, our visitors, all our suppliers and distributors are going to be protected. So that's one of the core elements that I just wanted to hit on, is that the original architects knew this, and they put in provisions for fire departments, not fire districts. We are an independent political subdivision of the state, so language does mean everything in this case. And it's just getting that language of fire district recognized to give us the opportunity to at least ensure that we are providing the protection that we should. And I will take any questions, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. I've got a date night tonight too, so hopefully we'll get you out early. Thank you.
And just sort of to wrap this up and have a bit of conclusion before the questions, this bill is the product of 10 years of experience coming out of Story County. The original abatement process was long done and thoughtful, but it did have a few gaps, like fire districts were not directly mentioned. This bill hopefully will amend those shortcomings and allow local governments to have a seat at the table earlier to discuss these bigger topics for, again, just the $1 billion and $3.5 billion sort of mega companies, the gigafactory size ones, because we think these perspectives should be shared with literally the rest of the state, because our lessons have been learned, but they could be codified into this law, SB 69. So thank you all for hearing us, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I will go ahead and start with Assemblymember Golding.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for the presentation. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about the caps, the 10% cap and the 20% cap, and what happens if when you're making the estimate of expenses in all the categories that you've listed, if it exceeds those caps, who eats that cost?
I'd be happy to. Austin Osborne for the record, if you like, through the chair. Okay, directly. Thank you, Assembly Member. In responding to that, everything we put in this bill and all the discussions we've had leading up to it are really just based off of real life experience that we've had with the 2 gigafactories. So to give an example what that looks like, there's another person at the gigafactory that we're going back and forth in these negotiations to come up with fire, police, courts, and all that. And the first question they ask is, show us the data. And so we gather all the data, our entire team, our assessor's office, myself, our sheriff, our dispatch center, our fire chief, all of us go through, we look at 911 calls, we look at road costs per mile and different types of road. We look at all of the different things, our FTE cost, full-time equivalents, including PERS and outfitting those deputies and tires and desks, everything you can think of. And we put all that together and we share it with that company openly. And then we discuss it, we negotiate. And they call all kinds of numbers, like, really, what's going on with that number? And we have to prove it. We have to show that these numbers are really valid and that they would apply to the use of that gigafactory. In our case, for the first round, we had to show that it would apply to a new gigafactory. And on the second round, we were able to actually show the numbers that were applying to the prior gigafactory, therefore would apply to the new gigafactory. So it's those parties working together back and forth on that data, and they scrutinize every single dollar, and they are checking on their side to make sure that we're not trying to make money in the deal, that we're trying to simply offset the cost, not just of having those units, but that portions of those units are actually responding to that use and not everything else that's going on around the county. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thanks. I am delighted to hear that there's an in-depth analysis of what the true expenses would be. I guess what I'm wondering is there an opportunity? So right now, they're built into the bill, there are caps. There's the 10% cap and the 20% cap. What you just described sounds like a more accurate cost analysis without caps. Why not eliminate the caps and just go with the actual costs and perhaps have a true up at 5 years, at 10 years?
Okay, I'd be happy to answer that question. Assembly Member Austin Osborne, for the record. Our original bill did not have those caps in it. We had been asked to look at putting some guardrails in the bill. There was some concerns that, there's just no cap there. Boy, you could just negotiate anything. So we were asked to look at those, and we were able to come down to a 10 and 20% respective to the $1 billion abatement company and the $3.5 billion abatement company. The $1 billion pays some taxes. They pay 25% of property tax, so there is some revenue coming in. So we brought that number in lower. And then that 3.5 is not paying any taxes, so the number is a little bit higher. The numbers also match the reality of what happened with different uses in Story County. So for Redwood, for example, the $1 billion roughly matches in an area about what probably would have been needed to respond to that use over a 10-year period. Probably not enough, but we're comfortable with a number knowing that there's some other factors involved with revenues. And then the number matches roughly on that 3.5, the Tesla Gigafactory, that it would allow what we needed in there. And that would be, for example, road rehabilitation to that facility. I might let the fire chief, if you have anything you want to add with fire district equipment to that facility, and all those other things I described. It's about $26 million there for the Gigafactory 1, and about another, I believe, is another 12 or so for Gigafactory 2. And then this would allow about $7 million for the Redwood one that's out there now. Probably a little bit lean for us, but we're comfortable with the whole picture here, working with all the parties up into this point to put those guardrails in place to assure them that they can do economic development and have some controls at the local level.
Thank you. If you were you mentioned Esmeralda County, do they have the resources available to upfront those costs? You may not know that, but conceptually, we've got a tiny little county, right? So and this is, we're trying to develop good policy for the whole state. So in our smaller counties with limited resources, I'm wondering if upfronting the costs that should be in the GSA, and it's then amortized over the 10 years, right? If a county doesn't have those resources, somebody's hurting for that, right? Because you're paying for something with that money now, and now you're building this additional infrastructure. I guess I'm concerned about that, and if there has been some thought put into that, how will smaller counties with more limited resources account for that?
Okay, I'll go ahead to Austin Osborne for the record, and I believe the folks here with me may also have some comments respective to what they're working on as well, like fire. I can't speak to Esmeralda County. I don't know their budget and their overall paradigm. We know that this bill applies to small counties like Esmeralda, like Story County was at one time, very small budget. If the Gigafactory would have come in 2014 to Story County based on its capacity, we don't believe that the county would have been able to provide the adequate services to the Gigafactory during that 10-year of abatement period at the time in 2014 and 15 and 16 and 17, et cetera, with the funds that we had available. It was that government services agreement that this would just require, but already is allowable, and Tesla negotiated with that, and because of that, we were able to provide the services that they needed during that 10-year abated period without any compromise to the county's budget. At the time, Story County's budget was very small.
I have a follow-up, and then I'm going to go to another one of our members.
Well-
It sounds to me that Story County has been able to do a GSA successfully with Tesla 1, Tesla 2, maybe not so hot with Redwood. But can you point to a situation like in the past where there's been an undesirable result from the efforts to work under the current structure of our laws with respect to these economic development projects?
Yes, Jeremy Longcar for the record. I'll chime in here and I'll be very specific about the fire service side of it. And I also want to follow up just a little bit on your question there as well. The fire district was included in the very first GSA that was there. Now, this was brand new to the state. This is something this was uncharted territory for all of us. So we were kind of lumped in and we were able to get some of the things we needed. All the projects past that point, the fire district has not been able to negotiate anything with. So if we look at, and not trying to pick certain industries that are out there or companies. However, if you look at the nature of the industrial park and the lithium batteries, you see it on the news. They light on fire. It's part of just how they're constructed. With these types of fires, we are responding to a record number of fires with no way to actually fund that additional resources. So we are feeling the direct burden of that right now. And unfortunately, as Story County's grown, we're getting very creative, and we're able to find some sort of other alternative funding to try to get people on there. But you got to be careful when you're looking for alternative funding and you're dealing with people's lives and livelihood, right? You want reoccurring revenue to support reoccurring expenses. If I'm a Nye County boy, so I can speak a little bit for it. Nye County, Esmeralda County, other than Prump, they're volunteer fire departments. If I was chief down there, I wouldn't know how I could deal with it, with those types of caps. Obviously, I would try to strike some sort of balance with the company, and much like we see in Elko County with the fire brigades, they would have to provide something internally that wouldn't be part of that GSA, but part of an agreement of, you need to help us somehow. So in the mine situation in Elko and Eureka counties, obviously they have fire brigades. So that helps assist that. So I hope that helps just a little bit with both your questions.
So Chief Lockhart, can I ask a follow-up with respect to that? So I understand some of our rural areas are subject to tax districts, so our fire departments are funded differently than our county fire departments, our municipal fire departments. With this, though, I'm assuming your tax district would be under this tech hub, or I forget what you guys call the area, where Tesla's at. But now are you benefiting with additional revenue that was not there at some point? Is there I'm trying to figure that out.
Yes, Jeremy Longcar again for the record. So yes, we are, as companies' abatements fall off, we get it, but that doesn't take into account the building up for that business and that 10-year period of tax abatements. So there is a long wait to try to get to that goal, and we don't want to do it with minimal staffing and equipment that just isn't suited for the job. So without that money up front and some sort of an agreement to get the equipment and get the people, we're still not providing the service during that time.
Thank you so much for that. I'll go to Assemblymember Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, bear with me. I have a couple questions, if that's okay. So I do see that there's like this difference between on page 5, the 10% abatement and the 20% abatement. And I think I understand that correctly because at the 1 billion cap, the 10% is because of the 25% property tax, correct? Okay. And then you guys were also talking about like the various GSAs that you have received in the past. And I was hearing numbers like 12 million, 26 million. What's the largest amount of GSA that you've actually received with all of these projects?
Thank you, Austin Osborne, for the record. The GSA that we got, we'll keep it simple. It was about $12 million for the first gigafactory, and halfway through there was a renewal. At the time, it was uncharted territory. So it was about $7 million added to that for the first gigafactory, and the second gigafactory was roughly 12.
Okay. So with this particular legislation, you guys could be looking at yielding anywhere between 30 million to 60 million. That is a huge jump.
I'd be happy to answer that question, unless somebody else. Okay, I'll go ahead and start it. Austin Osborne, for the record. What we looked at in this is with the first gigafactory, it happens to be located next to a fire station. It's also right in the middle of an industrial park. So we only had to negotiate what we were actually putting into responding to the gigafactory's needs. There are places in our county and certain places in other counties that may have a gigafactory in a remote area that requires a fire station or a portion of a fire station, fire apparatus trucks, roads, and other types of things that might necessitate that being higher. Again, the important part of the bill, as well as the current law, is that we can only capture what we can prove that we use to respond to the factory, not make money during that abatement period. But that's why that extra might be needed, and it may not be needed.
If I may, Clay Mitchell, for the record, Assemblymember Gallant, in the wording of the bill, it's an either or. And so the cap is there, but there's also wording, as the county manager mentioned, that it's really for the recapture of impacts. And so if those impacts do not add up to 10 or 20%, we can't ask for that if we can't show that that's an actual impact of the project. So there's actually an either or that ends up really bringing it to kind of the bare minimum to make sure that we can welcome that project and make sure it works, but we're not asking for extra beyond that.
Do you mind if I keep going? Okay, thank you. Also I'm taking a look at it. It looks like you guys are expanding the definition of local government services and infrastructure. And I guess I'm concerned about, well, let me get to it. This very ambiguous, any other services or infrastructure agreed upon, like it kind of opens this Pandora's box. It brought me back to the time before we put in legislation, like what the community benefits could be for like the various utility companies, and the municipalities were sort of taking advantage of like the Cox, and they were like, we need to rein this in. So I'm worried that we could be opening up Pandora's box with such wide open language.
I'd be happy to answer. Austin Osborne, for the record. We, during the first run of the bill, did not have that. The Governor's Office of Economic Development, others asked if we could put some guardrails in the bill to provide some definition and some structure so it wasn't completely wide open, and that's the language that resulted of that. And my team here may have some other to add to that.
So the language around GSAs and what is identified in it was the list of things known that were paid for in previous GSAs, but there's sort of a catch-all there, I believe it's M, that does have some general clauses to it because this bill is for state applicability. Story County knows what Story County knows, and the costs that were paid for and assumed at the county level, there could be other costs that are unthought of today now in other counties that we didn't want to, close out and be too specific about, but also we wanted to list it to show some generality of what is going to be expected of a company in a GSA. You don't want it just to be wide open and you don't want it to be undefined, but we try to have a balance there.
And thank you, Mr. Adler. If you guys can remember to say your name for the record.
They're muting me. Okay. Thank you for that. And I'm glad that you brought up GoEd. Like, it sounds like you guys have been working together. And I know, Mr. Adler, you and I yesterday had said that GoEd was now in support of that bill. Is that still correct?
Today and now, GoEd, I believe, has produced an amendment for some final tweaks, but as of now, I do not believe GoEd is in support of SB 69 as written, but I do think we've come a long way from their original comments, and we incorporated them in the redraft of the bill before you. So it is a lot closer to palatability we would hope for GoEd today.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. You got to keep saying your name.
Will
I'm so
Adler
sorry.
for the record, sorry.
If Chair would mind, at some point, I'd like to possibly hear from GoEd about what their concerns are. These are big numbers.
Okay, and I think they are going to testify. So let me go through some others. We do have a couple more questions. Let me go to Assemblymember Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say hi to my neighbors. No. Just a couple things real quick. This, the abatements have always seemed like an unfunded mandate. And as an institution, I thought we, got rid of unfunded mandates quite a while ago, but it's neither here nor there now. It's just, hopefully we have a fix in the works. But the question is, why haven't the districts gone after NRS 360 in the past?
Hi, yes, Jeremy Longcar for the record. And Assemblyman Gray, I remember discussing this with you. Myself, I come down and met with you in PK. Here was the last legislative session. Unfortunately, we were just a little late to get a bill. Unlike the county, we don't automatically get one, which would be great. Maybe we ought to work on that legislation in time. However, we did start to ring that bell early when we were finding these deficits. And like I said, it kind of went against how the bill was drafted to begin with. They put in those protections, but to think just that phrase, fire district, excluded us. And, once that was discovered, we started ringing that bell, and with the cooperation of the county, they had stuff that they needed to clean up as well. And it was just a good opportunity to combine those thoughts together and really enhance this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Now, another quick question for Mr. Osborne and Mr. Mitchell. You guys ready for that land swap yet? Just saying.
I think that was just a statement. We'll go to Assemblymember Roth.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. It took me a minute to get over our loss, so I did start listening, though. But we will forgive you for being so good at basketball.
I was like, what are you talking about?
So I'm looking at sections 3 and 7, the notification and acknowledgement of application. If you can just speak to why that language specifically and the need for that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that. Clay Mitchell for the record. So we found that sometimes, and we don't know if it's a structural issue or just kind of the way that things have ended up, but sometimes we're not finding out about these large projects until very close to the end. We understand that the information that companies are sharing is sensitive. When they're considering a big move or a big new project, they don't want to upset where they currently are until they're sure that that's the direction that they want to go. But sometimes that's been interpreted to exclude the local jurisdictions so that we're not notified until fairly late in the process. And so we wanted to just make sure, absolutely crystal clear, that when an application is first received, that we are notified fairly early on. Now, that has always been a bit performative because we were required under law to acknowledge, but there was no other purpose for receiving that letter. It was not that we were signing off on it. It was just, hey, congrats. Like Austin said, it's a boy, you got one coming. So sometimes those came so close that we didn't have an ability to have any sort of real prep time, or sometimes within about a month or a month and a half of the GOED board considering it. One of the things that we thought was important was, as we talked, and there were some local jurisdictions that said, we don't really need to be involved in this way because we can use current structures and regulations like a special use permit process to get the things that we need. So the wording that we crafted in there was that if a jurisdiction needs this process to negotiate a government services agreement, they're given 15 days from that notification to respond. And if they respond that they need one, they have to then certify that they don't have another way to recapture or cover those costs. And that would then allow them to appoint someone to be read into the non-disclosure agreements and start participating in the process. So that was our thought process behind it. Number one, just to ensure that there was early notification so that we could start preparing. And secondly, to trigger that process so that the local jurisdiction can be looking at what do we really need, and that can be running concurrently with GOED and the RDA's process of getting the abatements done.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. We'll go ahead and have you guys step back, and we'll open up testimony in support of a Senate Bill 69. For ease, I'll start in Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give testimony in support of Senate Bill 69? We'll come to Carson City. Anyone wishing to give testimony in support of Senate Bill 69, please come up and begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Backus, Vice Chair Considine, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jennifer Berthiaume. That's Berthiaume, Government Affairs Manager at the Nevada Association of Counties, or NACO, whose members represent all 17 counties. NACO is here to support SB 69, specifically concepts that increase and strengthen county input. Our members support a meaningful and robust perspective that engages local government to provide for dialogue around county fiscal and operational impacts from these large-scale projects. We'd like to thank the sponsors and the committee for hearing this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to the phone lines. AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give a testimony in support of Senate Bill 69?
Chair, the public lines are open and working. We have no callers to give support testimony at this time.
Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and take testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 69. We'll start here in Carson City. Mr. Wood, if you don't include this in your opposition testimony, we may have a question for you from one of our assembly members, but we'll let you begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Stephen Wood, Director of Strategy and Public Policy for the Governor's Office of Economic Development. I'm here today in opposition to SB 69 in its current form. We were led to believe that there would be an amendment presented to the committee today. We negotiated with the bill sponsors in the weeks leading up to this hearing and got close to agreeing on amendment language. And I want to thank them for those fruitful conversations. But we are disappointed that an amendment was not presented. I have also been made aware that some of the members of the committee have been told that GOED supports the bill. To set the record straight, in its current form, we are not in support. But we have put together an amendment that I understand was shared with the committee. Although that amendment was rejected by the sponsors of the bill, if that amendment were to be accepted, we would support the bill. One thing that the amendment that we put together does is it brings the GSA cap for an abatement for a company that makes a $3.5 billion capital investment into the state of Nevada from 20% to 10%. Based on the most recent abatement package of that kind, a 10% cap would have led to a GSA of approximately $33 million. A 20% cap of that GSA for that abatement package for a GSA would have been $66 million that the company would have had to pay. A GSA was negotiated for that project that I'm talking about, and as it was just mentioned in the hearing, that GSA was around $12 million. As was mentioned in the question and answer session, that is a very significant increase. So for those reasons, we are opposed to the bill in its current form, and we hope that the sponsors will continue to work with us and that we can get to a place where we can offer our support.
Assemblymember Gallant has a question for you, Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Chair. GoEd deals and speaks with these companies that are looking to make Nevada a home. So I'm sure you have an idea about like what their threshold is. So can you share like would they be open to a 10% and 20% cap, or would that be something that would scare businesses away from Nevada?
Stephen Wood for the record, and thank you for that question. I think you've kind of hit the point of why we're still in opposition to the bill. So a 20% cap at, using the most recent abatement package that we're talking about here at $66 million. I mean, when we're talking to these companies, right, we are trying to attract them to the state to offer quality jobs for our residents, right? That is our objective at GoEd. But a company also has to worry about their bottom line. So if we have a company coming to the state of Nevada and we've got the statute in front of them, they're doing the math as well. And that could be concerning to them. The proof is in the pudding, right? A company came to Story County. They negotiated a GSA, and that GSA was around $12 million. As I've been told, they were happy with that GSA. Both the company and the local jurisdiction was happy with that. So, we're asking for a 10% cap, which is still far above where that GSA landed. So I know there was some discussion about needing some wiggle room. There was some discussion about, well, if this wasn't there, or that wasn't there, we might need to have a little bit extra room. I think our amendment accomplishes that.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. We'll continue with testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 69 here in Carson City.
Good afternoon, Chair Backus, Vice Chair Considine, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kelly McNeil, McNeil, Executive Director for the Nevada League of Cities. Our member cities depend on flexible tools to attract investment, support job creation, and plan critical infrastructure. SB 69 in its current form threatens that flexibility by imposing rigid restrictions on how local governments negotiate economic development agreements. These agreements are not one size fits all. They must be tailored to meet local needs and respond to real-time opportunities. Limiting local discretion risks stalling future projects that are essential to community growth. The League fully supports transparency and accountability. This bill goes too far and could unintentionally hinder development, particularly in rural and fast-growing communities. We appreciate the Governor's Office of Economic Development, or GoEd, for engaging stakeholders, including several of our member cities, in drafting a proposed compromise amendment that we believe better balances oversight with local control. We are disappointed that this amendment was not presented today, and for these reasons, the Nevada League of Cities respectfully opposes SB 69. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. For the record, Danny Thompson today representing Tract. We are a data center developer. We currently own more than 14,000 acres in Story County and are developing 500 acres at a time. One of those 500-acre parcels is about $100 million in cost. And so and we appreciate Story County and want to thank Story County for working with us on the first iteration of this bill. We just feel that this current version is not proportional to the need, that it, given our numbers, that it would be, you would end up with pretty large numbers, and we support something being done, but we think the current version of this bill is too much. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Assembly Revenue Committee. For the record, my name is Neil E. McIntyre, McIntyre, the Mayor of Fernley, and I am here on behalf of the City of Fernley in respectful opposition to Senate Bill 69. Fernley is proud to be one of Nevada's fastest growing municipalities, a community that has embraced thoughtful, strategic economic development Over the past decade, we have worked diligently to diversify our local economy, attracting significant private sector investments in advanced manufacturing, logistics, and clean technology. These successes have not happened by chance. They are a product of targeted economic planning and strong partnership between local government, business leaders, and both state and regional development authorities. Unfortunately, SB 69 in its current form puts that progress at risk. By introducing sweeping limitations on local government's ability to negotiate and structure development agreements, this bill threatens the flexibility Fernley and other communities need to respond to dynamic economic opportunities. Economic development is not a one-size-fits-all. The ability to tailor incentives and agreements to specific projects is a core part of how communities like ours compete, not just within Nevada, but with other states actively recruiting the same industries. If this bill were law 5 or 10 years ago, several of the major job-creating projects in Fernley might have never materialized. That is not a hypothetical risk. It's a very real concern, especially for the city working to maintain momentum in infrastructure investment, job creation, and workforce housing.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members, Albert Torres, Fernley City Council. To be clear, we support transparency and accountability in public-private partnerships. In fact, Fernley has always operated with a focus on fiscal stewardship, transparency, and community benefit. We understand the motivation behind SB 69, but we believe it goes too far and could unintentionally dismantle tools that have proven effective. We are grateful to the Governor's Office of Economic Development for inviting Fernley to collaborate on the amendment that we believe offers a constructive path forward. This compromising language maintains appropriate guardrails while preserving local control and the ability needed to keep Nevada competitive. We understand that the bill sponsor was also collaborating on an acceptable amendment that was supposed to be presented and adopted at this hearing, and evidently that is not the case, and Fernley is disappointed. At its core, this conversation is about the future of rural and regional economic development in Nevada. Fernley's ability to invest in roads, utilities, broadband, and affordable housing depends on continued economic activity. SB 69, as currently drafted, would chill investment, stall key projects, and make it harder for communities like Fernley to grow in a sustainable and strategic way. On behalf of our mayor, city council, and residents, we respectfully urge you to adopt the proposed amendment as introduced by GOED, or to pause and reconsider this legislation. Fernley is committed to Nevada's success, and we ask for the flexibility to keep doing our part to build it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Paul Moratkin with the Vegas Chamber. The Chamber is also opposed to SB 69. As many of you know, numerous individuals have been involved in this process trying to find a resolution between the parties. Unfortunately, 14 weeks into this process, that has not come to fruition. The Chamber is concerned about the bill and the impact it would have on the statewide economic development efforts and the message it would send to prospective employers and businesses looking to look at Nevada to relocate. As the concerns of the economy grow, it's important that our economic development tools are as robust as possible, and they're clear and they're concise, and businesses know that deals that are made will be upheld. And that's why we're concerned with the current provisions of SB 69. Also, specifically to the bill, the Chamber does have concerns with the cost sharing, as you've heard, and the fact that it's not been resolved is a growing concern to the Chamber, especially when some of these investments can exceed over $1 billion. We do support the amendment that has been brought forward and mentioned by Mr. Wood from GOED, and if the adoption of that amendment did occur, the Chamber would move to neutrality. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for your time today.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Paul Enos, here today representing the Nevada Manufacturers Association in opposition to Senate Bill 69. Manufacturers have been the recipients of a lot of these abatements to come to the Silver State. You know, Nevada is one of the top 5 states in the country in terms of manufacturing growth. And I think a lot of that is through the results of GOED and their partners at the local development authorities. The last thing we would want to see is legislation that could stall that. I do want to say, while we are in opposition to this bill today, I think we are close. I want to thank the folks in Story County because we have resolved a lot of the issues that we initially had with the bill. And we also would be supportive of this amendment, and that would change the go-ahead amendment, and that would change our position on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Las Vegas. We'll go ahead and accept testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 69 in Las Vegas.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Amber Stidham with the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. We're the Regional Economic Development Authority for Southern Nevada. First, I want to thank Story County Commissioner Mitchell for reaching out after the proposal's initial hearing and sense regarding LVGA's concerns and receiving our recommendations for what we believe would be amenable amendments to accommodate all parties. And as you heard, much of the amendments in the bill, while LVGA appreciates the work and agrees with many of the changes included within it, it does not address our primary concern, which is similar to all those that have voiced their opposition. And we also believe it is a one-size-fits-all solution that might negatively impact our ability to attract regionally significant projects to our area. That are also negotiated by local planning authorities, whether it's county or municipal. Southern Nevada has robust county and local planning commissions already engaged in project development and corresponding agreements on the outset. So this proposal, as outlined, we believe could deter investments from even setting sight on our communities as a result, which again is, I think, the opposite intended action we wish to see it to occur. And to concur with some of the other testimonies, it would be our recommendation that SB 69 is focused on either the unique economic development district created in Story and its needs, or to the point, GOED's amendment that was provided to the proposal would be supported by LVGEA, and we as an organization would move to neutral as a result. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Bacchus and members of the committee. My name is Emily Osterberg, and I am here representing the Henderson Chamber of Commerce and our over 2,000 members to express our opposition to SB 69. We would also like to thank Commissioner Mitchell for reaching out to us and discussing this bill. However, as economic development is a priority for our chamber, we still have concerns this legislation will negatively impact Southern Nevada's ability to attract large-scale projects, and we're also concerned with the cost-sharing aspects of this bill. So for this reason, we are opposed to SB 69 as it's currently written. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll go to the phone lines. AVH, do we have anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 69?
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 69, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Hello, Chair and everyone. This is Peter Guzman, President of the Latin Chamber of Commerce. Sorry for any background noise. I literally just got off an airplane. We were prepared to be in support of this bill, but without the amendment, there is no way we can support this bill. So we're in opposition. We believe that this bill is a staller, not something that helps growth, but stalls it. And so for those reasons and many that my colleagues before me spoke about, we are opposed to this bill. Thank you.
Chair, we have no more callers for opposition at this time.
Thank you so much. We will move to neutral testimony. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to give neutral testimony to Senate Bill 69? We'll go to Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Senate Bill 69? AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Senate Bill 69?
Chair, we have no callers for neutral.
Perfect. With that, I'll go ahead and invite the bill sponsor back up for any closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Clay Mitchell for the record. I certainly appreciate all of the input and just wanted to respond to a couple of the things that were said. First of all, I wanted to correct a few of the numbers that Mr. Wood shared. The way that the limits are drafted is they're not on the total amount of the abatement, but they're only on the local portion, and that reduces the total amount that would be eligible to be asked for. So it's not a huge amount because the local jurisdictions support most of the burden of the abatement, but instead of 33 and 66, that comes down to 30 million and 60 million roughly on that example that he used. And he talked about how the last one that we negotiated was $12 million. That was an add-on to a current factory, and so most of the infrastructure was already in place, and so we were able to be fairly meager about the things that we asked for. I appreciate those who have taken the time to engage with us, feel like we've done what we can to address the concerns that they have expressed to us. Disappointed in some of the people that testified against it, that refused to engage with us, and that's really frustrating when we're trying to make this the best bill that we can. I have a little different perspective on people who believe that this would have a chilling effect on development. I feel this actually creates better policy because what it does is it lets companies coming in know up front if a local jurisdiction opts into this process, which they're not required to do. And so those who are concerned about that, they can just opt out of it and use whatever other process they have in place. But if they opt into this process, it lets that company coming in know up front what's going to be asked of them when it comes to covering the infrastructure that's needed, as opposed to getting through the abatement process and then having to face a special use permit process, conditions from from a planning commission, conditions from a council or a commission, potentially no idea what's going to be asked to get their approvals down the road. So this actually gives more certainty and speed because it's happening while the abatement process is happening. Certainty and speed is what we provide, and that's what's made us successful. And that actually is one of the reasons that we're asking for this bill, is because it provides better policy going forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to County Manager Osborne.
Thank you, Austin Osborne. For the record, Story County Manager. So just in a closing statement here, just want to reiterate and really make sure it's clear. Story County finds these abatement categories that are offered in the NRS as promoted by GOED as opportunities. The Tesla Gigafactory was an investment for our county. It had 10 years of endurance of having to take on and change our culture, as we talked about, and be able to address some of those fiscal concerns and build our staff and our teams up and be able to respond to that use. That ultimately has not only transformed Story County today into it being able to invest in its communities, replace infrastructure that was put in right after the Civil War, critical infrastructure like water and sewer and others. And also is beginning to transform Nevada into becoming a diverse economy with skills and advanced manufacturing and all the things that we talk about that are happening today that were not happening in 2011 and 10 and 9. So we're not here against the abatement programs. We support the 3.5 and the $1 billion programs. They're good. But we have, through our experiences over the last decade, weekly, monthly, annually, sometimes daily, having to navigate through the NRSs and navigate through the companies and come up with ways to address unique circumstances and challenges for companies that are building a plane while they're flying it because it's new technology. These are the things that we built 69 to respond to. They're things that we experience that we know counties and cities across the state of Nevada would experience. So we've listened to the opposition, we've listened to concerns and others, and we've negotiated and we've amended SB 69. Roughly about 50% of the bill remains as it was, and we were totally on board and voluntary with that entire process. We put guardrails on the government services agreement, better regulations, better definitions that we were asked to do. We make sure that we were looking at the needs and some of the unique circumstances of the urban counties and cities, as well as the rurals. And we severely capped the government services agreement. And as Commissioner Mitchell said, it further got capped by that local option being the final bill that came out of the Senate. And we're still okay with that. We are totally fine with it. So at this point, the math balances, we believe, in reality, and the data supports SB 69. We think might be one of the most improved bills through the process. And I'm quite proud of our team. All the folks that you see here, as well as folks in our background, our comptrollers with us online today, being flexible, being real, and looking out for rural counties, and also those folks around us that have worked with us. Thank you.
Jeremy Longcar for the record. And listen to the opposition. I was pleasantly surprised that no one opposed injecting fire districts into the bill. So that was a win for us. And I do kind of want to close out with just two little points here that I want to add to it is that, these aren't concerns just of mine since we've witnessed it firsthand in Story County. My neighboring jurisdictions and their fire chiefs express the exact same concerns. So much so that the professional firefighters in Nevada, as well as the Nevada State Fire Chiefs Association, stand behind this bill because we understand that we need to provide this service. And the last thing that I'll just kind of hit on, just to kind of put, there's so many numbers being thrown out of what could be and what couldn't be. And to try to put it in perspective is the original GSAs we received, let's keep in mind those were 10 years ago and needed to carry us for 10 years. So we look at a ladder truck right now, and our most recent quote is $2.2 million to get a ladder truck. So that money, although 10 years ago might have been somewhat more substantial, in today's world with the cost of living and all the rises and in just expenses and wages that we experience, that money does dwindle down. So let's keep that in mind proportionally, what 10 million meant 10 years ago versus what it really means today. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. We'll go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 69, and we will go ahead and move to our next bill on the agenda, which is Senate Bill 196, and I welcome our Majority Leader, Canizero, up to present that with, I'm assuming, some guests. And whenever you all get set up and ready, feel free to begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Nicole Canizaro, and I proudly represent Senate District 6 in the northwest portion of the Las Vegas Valley and serve as your Senate Majority Leader here in the Nevada Senate. I am pleased today to be here to present to you Senate Bill 196. With your permission, Madam Chair, what I would like to do is give a brief overview of the reason for Senate Bill 196, and then turn the presentation over to Mr. Gordon, who will walk us through some of the more technical expertise pieces of the bill and an overview of some of the precise language that resides in Senate Bill 196. Senate Bill 196 authorizes a heavy equipment rental company to charge a recovery fee of up to 2% to offset taxes levied on certain heavy equipment. Before going over the bill, I will provide just a little bit of context and then explain why I believe that this is a good piece of legislation. And I would note that we have, over the last several sessions, brought this bill forward in a few different versions, trying to solve what I do believe is a real problem for some of the businesses that operate in this space. And I think that we have come up with a very elegant solution that solves a lot of the issues that we have encountered in the past. And I'm very hopeful that this committee will give good and due consideration to Senate Bill 196 and hopefully get it over that final finish line this last time that we are hopefully going to present it in committee. As the law currently stands, Nevada assesses a full year of tangible personal property tax on any piece of heavy equipment that is in the state on July 1st of a given year, even if that piece of equipment is only in the state for 1 day. Nevada is one of only a few states continuing to use this form of taxation on heavy equipment. The vast majority of other states have moved to various forms of taxation or fees that are less onerous on businesses. In doing so, they have, of course, become a more attractive place to do business. As this committee knows, in Nevada, we pride ourselves on being business friendly. And as such, we continually search for the best ways to balance the need for revenue while maintaining a competitive edge over our neighboring states. Senate Bill 196 corrects an imbalance that places an unfair burden on an important business sector for our state. And so at this point, Madam Chair, I would like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Brian Gordon from Applied Analysis to take the committee through the bill.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Thank you, Chair Backus and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Brian Gordon. I'm a principal with Applied Analysis. I'm here to provide support and the analytical background as it relates to SB 196. So I have a brief presentation deck that I'd like to walk you through. Should be relatively quick. I think the Majority Leader has outlined the issue fairly well here and highlighted some of the key issues and challenges that the industry is facing. Overall, this provides some predictability for heavy equipment rental companies, provides some transparency for the public, for folks that are renting this type of equipment, and ease of administration has also been a pretty key point overall as it relates to this proposal. When we talk about what the industry and equipment looks like, and it's defined pretty well in the bill, at its essence, this is limited to specific types of heavy equipment rental companies that are defined by the North American Industry Classification System, or NAICS. There are two key provisions in that NAICS code and narrows the types of companies that would have the opportunity to participate in this recovery fee, and it would only apply to the rental revenues that they're charging to their customers. And then there's also provisions around the length of period of the rentals, relatively short-term type of equipment that moves in and out of the state. And then there are some exclusions, most of which includes things like federal, state, and local governments would be excluded from this particular recovery fee. The example that you heard about with equipment moving in and out of the state, the assessment process that takes place, and then ultimately the taxation is based on where that equipment sits on July 1 of any given year. This equipment does move in and out of the state and could be essentially taxed again in another state that has a different assessment date. And so that mobility of that equipment is what's causing part of the challenge that heavy equipment rental companies are facing day to day. The question about why now, why is the state looking at implementing something of this nature? You can see here on the graph that all but 4 states, including Nevada, have some sort of relief related to this. Either states aren't taxing this type of equipment, they already have some reforms that they've put in place, either through a replacement tax or some sort of other recovery fee. All of that has resulted in just 4 states that are facing this particular challenge that's been outlined previously. There are 9 states that have adopted a similar recovery fee structure that we're talking about here in the state of Nevada. Utah, most recently this year, approved a similar provision in the state of Utah that essentially adopts a recovery fee that allows for heavy equipment rental companies to charge this fee back to their customers. How this particular recovery fee would work, it's relatively straightforward. As it stands today, essentially the assessors would assess this property on July 1. Those heavy equipment rental companies would pay that tax for that year, and that is the process, how it exists today. That process doesn't change tomorrow. If SB 196 were to move forward, that process remains exactly the same. This would just be a recovery fee on the invoice that equipment rental companies charge to their customers, and everybody would see it, and it would be relatively transparent. The process of how this works is that heavy equipment rental companies can essentially opt into this particular recovery fee if they so choose. It's not mandated. They can charge up to an amount of 2%, not to exceed 2%. They would hold those funds in a separate account at their companies or their organizations, and then those dollars could only be used to offset their personal property tax liability. Those funds could not be used for any other purpose other than to cover the cost of their personal property taxes. Just a sort of summary slide here at the end, just to hit on a couple of elements of the bill that I think are relevant as you think about and deliberate this particular proposal. I mentioned earlier this is permissive. It is not mandated, so companies that prefer not to charge this particular recovery fee can opt out of it. They don't have to participate. This is completely voluntary. Government agencies would not incur any of the recovery fees, so to the extent they're renting heavy equipment from these types of businesses, they would be exempted from any recovery fees going forward. The recovery fee is not a fee on top of a tax or a tax on top of a tax, if you want to think about it that way. So there's no pyramiding, if you will, of the fee. All of it existing taxes are excluded from the recovery fee and are only on the rental charge itself. This also does provide some protections for rental companies as well as the consumers. Again, having this in statute provides really the protections and outlines how this process should work so that folks can understand clearly what's intended here. You can imagine there are companies out there that could charge a 5 or 7% surcharge or some other collection fee that they refer to on an invoice with nobody really knowing what the purpose of that fee is for. This would provide the exact or precise parameters around how that could be charged and what it can be used for, and avoid a lot of ambiguity that exists in the market today and potentially going forward. There is no fiscal impact for governments. As I mentioned, counties will continue the assessment and taxation process for personal property taxes as they do today. And then there's also provisions in the bill that would allow the Nevada Department of Taxation to conduct their recurring audits like they would do at any point in time. And obviously there would be penalties that would apply if there were instances of fraud, as does exist in other statutes today. So that would also be relevant for this particular proposal. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
We do. Thank you so much for your presentation. We'll go ahead and start with Assemblymember Flanagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Since it sounds like it's a fee that a company can pass on to its customer, why can't you do that without this needing to go into some form of legislation?
Chair Backus, Brian Gordon for the record. Great question. I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but maybe I wasn't making it clear. Companies can be charging any sorts of fees today, and this would make it black and white clear in terms of why they're charging the fee and what it's intended to be used for. It would be transparent for the consumer. It would avoid any guesswork as to why certain companies are charging certain fees or suggesting it's being used for something else. This would provide, I believe, protections for the public in terms of the intent of these types of fees that would be included on an invoice to a company renting this type of equipment.
Next, I'll go to Assemblymember De Silva.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you, Majority Leader, for gracing us here in the Assembly and co-presenter. Just a quick question of, it's more so a clarification question. So for the purposes of understanding this bill, what's heavy equipment, in a working definition of heavy equipment?
Thank you, Assemblymember. Within SB 196, we've got definitions about the types of equipment that it includes. Heavy equipment rental properties identified in Section 6. This is the type of equipment that's generally held in inventory by these types of companies that rent this out on a short-term basis. So it's held in inventory either for sale or for lease. And then these are the companies are classified by the North American Industry Classification System under two specific codes. So it's a very defined type of company and it's a very defined type of equipment. This is the type of equipment that a construction company on a major project may just rent on a short-term basis because they need a particular type of backhoe or some other type of equipment that they just don't have in their stock, and they have companies out there that will rent that to them on a short-term basis to allow projects to continue to move forward. So that's generally the type of equipment that's being discussed here in this bill.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gordon. Also, remember to say your name. I know that's weird, and you don't have to go through me. You can always go directly to the member. I had a quick question because I've had the pleasure of sitting through this bill in its various forms 3 out of 4 times, and I think one of my other colleagues here has been here 4 out of 4 times. So my question for you, because I remembered and I always thought it was so odd how we do do the tax on our heavy equipment, that it's this random day, 1 day a year. And I was like, why doesn't people just move their equipment like out of state on June 30th? And so they would be taxed on whatever remains in the state on July 1st. But of course, we have usually a lot of construction going on, so I bet that's kind of hard to do. So, but my question was, like, I started thinking about this, is the collection of the 2% recovery fee on the equipment, is it would be possible. And it seems weird to me that you may be collecting that 2% on equipment that could then be out of state at another project. Let's say there's something going on in southern Utah right on that July 1st time period. And so I'm just kind of, and I don't know if this is really a question or just me kind of thinking of it from a public policy standpoint, is now there's going to be this fee collected on equipment that we may not be really taxing on July 1st that's also going into the account that could only be used to offset the tax. So I'm trying to reconcile that part in my head.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Nicole Canizaro, Senate District 6. And I think that the bill is solving sort of one of the problems there. First of all, I don't think that we have any data to suggest that people are moving this equipment out of state purposefully to avoid taxes, but certainly you can see why there may be an incentive to do so, and I think that the bill solves to sort of de-incentivize, right, people from trying to avoid paying those taxes from moving that equipment out of state. To your point, this equipment is big. It is often involved in, major construction projects. You think about the types of equipment, the kind of equipment that my 3-year-old gets really excited about when he sees it on the side of the road. That sort of inventory is maybe harder to manipulate in that fashion. And so there would be items here that would be taxed. I think one of the pieces that's important about Senate Bill 196 is that these fees cannot be used for another purpose, right? We're putting in parameters to make sure that there is proper accounting for all of the monies that are collected. That is reported to the Department of Taxation, and that there are audits that are going on. And so there's not really an incentive with this piece of legislation for a company to be sort of hoarding additional monies because they can't turn around and use this money for something else. They can't fill a different hole in their budgets or pay for some other item with the monies that are collected as part of this fee. And so I think to the point that Mr. Gordon made, this provides clarity and transparency for the customer who is renting the equipment, and also for the companies. It provides a way for them to pay those taxes, which we think that they will continue to pay. This just sort of makes that mechanism a little easier, and I think also, again, provides that ability to not incentivize folks to move equipment. And so I think this bill is really solving two of those things, even though I understand the point that you're trying to reconcile. And when I've asked those questions, I think that the part of this that's important is these monies really can only be used to help offset the taxes that are being paid. And we see that, of course, even now, given the current state of things. But this just allows that little bit of mechanism to provide that relief.
Next, I'll go to Vice Chair Considine.
Thank you, Chair. I do have two questions, but one of them just came up. So I understand this, that the recovery fees go into an account. It can't be spent for anything else. So are those accounts like non-interest bearing, or if there is interest that is accruing and it can't be used for anything else, what happens to that?
Thank you, Assemblymember. Brian Gordon, for the record. I remembered that time. It really would depend on what the heavy equipment rental companies decided to do with those funds, but it would be those funds are restricted for that particular purpose. So I think it's a fair question. I think the parameters of the bill would just suggest that it's dedicated in a separate account. I don't know if I have the answer to what would happen if there was some sort of interest earnings on that at some period of time. I would also mention that my expectation would be that the property taxes are probably actually fronted. So they would be outlying those dollars for the personal property tax ahead of the time at which they would probably collect the recovery fee. So there may be a theoretical negative balance that they would be putting those dollars out before they would be recovering any of those charges back.
Thank you. So just so I'm clear, then that means that they're not waiting until July 1st every year to pay those taxes. You're saying they're sort of fronting them as they go through?
Brian Gordon for the record. So the assessment is on July 1, and then subsequent to that, they would receive their personal property tax bill. And then throughout the course of the entire year, if that equipment remained in Nevada and it was rented, then they would have the opportunity to potentially charge up to a 2% recovery fee. So the recovery fee funds could come in after the point at which they've already paid the personal property taxes.
Thank you so much. And then, I'm sorry, Chair, can I ask my original question? So my original question is, I know you mentioned like backhoes and this is heavy equipment rental, and I don't know how far down the line heavy equipment rental goes, because like a Home Depot and sort of that equipment rental, that is a different NAICS kind of code, and you only mentioned the one NAICS. So if those aren't taxable, or not, I'm sorry, don't fall under the recovery fee, why not?
Thank you for the question. Brian Gordon for the record. So the heavy equipment rental companies, they're defined by those two NAICS codes, as you understood there. And Home Depot is a retailer and has a different code, and so they're separate from that. The purpose of this bill and defined in section, I believe it's section 1, these are companies, I'm sorry, section 5.1. These are companies that this is what they do. They are primarily engaged in the rental of heavy equipment. They're not doing, they're not selling goods at retail and other sorts of things. So this is their primary business, and this is all they do every day. And so they're sort of it's a narrower subset of companies that this would apply to.
Thank you so much. And we just have a follow-up from Assemblymember Flanagan, and that's our last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you once again. Just in your presentation, you mentioned the assessors have the responsibility. We may hear from someone on that side. I'm just kind of wondering the position of those offices, like in terms of supporting this, or where they stand on this.
Thank you for the question, Nicole Canizaro, Senate District 6. So I will not pretend to speak for any of the assessors. I know that we have had opposition to this bill in the way in which it has been crafted previous sessions. We've worked really hard to try to find a way that is not going to impede their processes. And so if this bill passes, nothing changes about how the assessors currently do their jobs, how they assess the taxes, how they are collected. This is just a mechanism to allow for some of that recovery to take place for these companies. And so I'm sure you may hear from assessors, but we have worked really hard, and on the Senate side, we did not have opposition from them when we presented the bill in the Senate Revenue Committee.
Thank you so much, Majority Leader and Mr. Gordon. At this time, we'll just ask you guys to step back, and we'll go ahead and start taking testimony. We'll start in Las Vegas for ease, because I think we just have our Department of Taxation, so I don't think they're probably going to come up and testify in support of a bill. So hopefully I've given time for folks to make their way to the front to testify in support of Senate Bill 196. And feel free, whoever gets to the microphone first, feel free to begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Good to see you. For the record, Trey Abney, T-R-A-Y-A-B-N-E-Y, here today representing the job creators of NFIB Nevada. We appreciate the Senate Majority Leader bringing this bill. Like you, have been here session after session as this issue has moved forward. I know her and her team have worked very hard to come to agreement. I mean, a couple things. Small business owners appreciate the choice to be able to participate in this or not. That doesn't happen a lot sometimes in this building when you get a choice to go through a process like this. If anything, business owners want stability and the ability to plan forward, so they can figure out their, the revenues they take in and the costs that they're going to pay throughout the year. This allows them to manage that and to plan in the future for any fees and any taxes that they may have to pay. So again, I'll keep it short. We support this bill, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chair. Mac Bybee, representing the Associated Builders and Contractors, for the record. Just short and simple, we believe this bill is a positive change for heavy equipment rental companies, and ask the committee for its support.
Thank you, Chair Backus and members of the committee, for having us and your time.
For the record, my name is Kevin Gurn. I'm Vice President of State Advocacy and Risk Management for the American Rental Association. Our association members are made up of rental companies across the country. It's nice to be back in Nevada. We actually just held our annual show here, Las Vegas, and we had about 10,000 attendees come to that. It's a buying show in which our members come to Las Vegas to purchase equipment from many different manufacturers. Our Nevada ARA members are represented by 22 different companies, and they have 51 rental locations or branches. Companies such as ECCO Equipment, Empire Southwest, All Star Rents, Nomad Lifts, just to name a few. I'm here today on behalf of the American Rental Association and the members in the state of Nevada in support of SB 196. As you heard in testimony, this follows legislation passed in many other states and fixes a problem. This will allow the ability for our members, made up of large and small businesses, to keep equipment in Nevada. I would like to thank Senator Cannizzaro for introducing this bill, and I would also like to thank the committee for considering this bill and ask for your support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Backus, members of the committee. Thank you for your time today. I'm Ed Noonan with United Rentals. I'm the Director of Government Affairs. We are an equipment rental company operating 27 locations and employing close to 500 highly valued associates here in Nevada. We are also a member of the American Rental Association. I'm here today on behalf of my company speaking in support of SB 196. I want to thank our bill sponsor, Senator Cannizzaro, and I also want to thank the committee for considering the issue and urge your support in passing Senate Bill 196. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Paul Moratkin with the Vegas Chamber. The Chamber is in support of SB 196. As you heard from the presentation from the Senate Majority Leader, they have put a lot of effort to address those previous concerns that were discussed last session about the impact it would have with assessors, and we hope that the bill does address those concerns. We do view this bill as a business-friendly bill to help the industry maintain equipment in the state. As you heard, they do make significant contributions not only within the industry with their heavy equipment, but also tourism trade numbers they bring into the state. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you so much. AVH, do we have anyone on the phone line wishing to give testimony in support of Senate Bill 196?
Chair, the public lines are open and working. We have no callers for support at this time.
Thank you so much. So we'll start with opposition testimony. I don't believe we have anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give a testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 196. So I'll come here to Carson City. Is there anyone wishing to give testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 196? Not seeing anyone coming forward. AVH, do we have anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 196?
Chair, we have no callers for opposition at this time.
Thank you so much. We'll go to neutral testimony. Department of Tax, last opportunity to give testimony in the neutral to Senate Bill 196. Not seeing anyone coming forward in Las Vegas, we'll come here to Carson City. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jana Seddon, Story County Assessor and Vice President of the Nevada Assessors Association. I was actually here for SB 69 and then realized that this bill was also, so I stayed to listen. Seems like there might be some questions for the assessor side of things, but today we are here in a neutral stance. We have the only concern that we have of this bill is we're kind of questioning why it is being put in NRS 361 as this is a fee. We feel like it is creating a special type of tax for a special type of person. We don't feel like it should be in 361. Where it should go, that is not up to the assessors to say. That is our only opposition. We have, excuse me, as we all know, this is, I believe, the fourth session. I was here working with Ed Noonan and Chris Ferrari and quite a few other people in the very first. We always wondered why a fee was not charged for this. So we have no opposition to the language as far as how it goes. Like I said, just we question why it's being put in NRS 361. Other than that, if you guys have any questions, I'll be glad to see if I can answer any of those for you.
I don't think we have any questions. Thank you so much for your input. We'll go to AVH. AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give neutral testimony to Senate Bill 196?
Chair, we have no callers for neutral.
Thank you so much. Would let Bill sponsor like to come back up for some closing remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nicole Cannizzaro, Senate District 6. We've worked very hard on this bill. It's Senate Bill 169 was introduced early, had a good early hearing in the Senate revenue side, have heard from no one on this bill about any concerns or opposition whatsoever. Reasons why this bill may be drafted in a particular chapter of NRS, I certainly leave those official conversations and decisions to our very adept and very able, smart legal counsel. Certainly, I would expect that if there are any additional concerns regarding this bill, that concern would be brought to my office, and certainly happy to work on any concerns if they are in fact material to the legislation. We'll certainly keep this committee apprised of any of those conversations, and really do appreciate the thoughtful questions and comments from members of the committee. And thank you again, Madam Chair, for allowing me to present this very important piece of legislation to your committee this evening. Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you. Mr. Nakamoto kind of popped in when we were going and said, we'll just double check with Mr. Fernley, who usually handles, I'm sure, the drafting of these bills, just to like double check if there's anything that we may need to tweak on that. So I appreciate your time today. And so with that, I'm happy to close the hearing on Senate Bill 196. And I can go ahead and open up public testimony at this time. It's the last item on our agenda. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to give public testimony this evening? I don't see anyone making their way up to the dais. Anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give public testimony this evening? Don't see anyone moving up. So we'll go to AVH. AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give public testimony this evening?
Chair, the public lines are open and working. We have no callers to give public comment at this time.
With that, I'm happy that we can go ahead and close our hearing this evening. Wish everyone a good night.